4th of July celebration. This is one of the many events that Elvehjem Neighborhood Association sponsors every year. Welcome to the celebration of our neighborhood's rich history. One of the things you need to know when you move to the Elvehjem neighborhood is how to pronounce Elvehjem. All the little kids get it because they can't read. When they read it, it can be confusing and a mouthful of marbles. So just remember these three letters, L, V, and M.
The Elvehjem neighborhood and its elementary school were named in honor of Conrad Elvehjem, who was the 13th president of the University of Wisconsin. He was also an internationally known biochemist in nutrition at the University of Wisconsin. He discovered vitamin B3, which solved a major health problem in the United States.
Our kids banged out the door first thing in the morning. They'd come home for lunch. They'd bang back out the back door and play all day. I mean, they played with the neighbor. There were so many kids in the neighborhood.
We really like it here.
We do.
It's a good neighborhood.
Yeah.
We've been happy.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
It's good for the neighborhood.
Yeah, we never intended on like a starter house. I think this was a house that we plan on being at for a long time.
It was great for our kids because they could just run anywhere and we could let them run. Well, there were certain boundaries, and there were always kids to play with. They never went outside. There wasn't some other child out there to play with.
Probably the best part was there was a lot of little kids running around, so you knew that it was going to be a good neighborhood to raise your family.
I love it. I hope to live here a while longer.
When we moved in here, as I said, we were familiar with it. But one thing that really grabbed you about this neighborhood at that time was kids. This was Fertile Valley. Everybody had kids.
We begin by telling you the story of the 60-year transformation from farmland to an urban neighborhood of over 1,600 homes. Only a few historic residences remain in modern Elvehjem. In 1880, J.M. Johnson built a house on his 120-acre farm at what is today 1713 Homburg Lane. In 1890, the Horstmeyers owned a 120-acre farm straddling Buckeye Road. This land has been subdivided over the years, and the former farmhouse is now on a half-acre parcel owned since 1998 by Cam French and Jim Dougherty.
For us, the home is very special. It feels good to us. It seems to exude a warmth all on its own. And I feel really blessed to live here. Really blessed.
So, and they think they're buying into trouble when they're buying an old house, but this house hasn't been much trouble at all, really.
In 1923, Minnie Horstmeyer sold 10 acres on the west end of the farm to her daughter and son-in-law, Hilda and Loyal Boutel. The Boutel house at 4522 East Buckeye Road was built that same year and is architecturally significant because it is one of Madison's best residential examples of Georgian Revival style. Designated as a City of Madison landmark in 2001, it is believed to have been designed by locally prominent architect Frank M. Riley. The Boutel property has been sold several times since Loyal's death in 1942. In 1968, Robert Schmidt acquired the property and created the Buckeye Woods Subdivision. The current owners, Damian and Judith Wilson, bought the home in 1982.
Well, I only knew that the Horstmeyers were at one point tobacco farmers. And this whole area along AB and south of town towards McFarland has many tobacco barns still. They're in terrible shape, but they show the history of tobacco farming in this area in the late 19th century and early 20th century. I don't know if the Horstmeyers were able to get a contract, but the government was selling a lot of contracts for tobacco for the military in April of 1917, and many of the tobacco farmers in this area made out very well and grew tobacco in the late 1917s, 18s, and 19s through that government contract. Anecdotally, when I was working maybe 25 years ago, I ran across some tobacco implements from tobacco farming on this property. So that was a nice piece of architecture and archaeology, in the sense that it sort of confirmed the fact that this land was, before the house was built, just a tobacco farm.
Construction of the East Belt Line, Highway 51, in 1949 opened the way for Far East Side development and established the western boundary of what was to become the Elvehjem neighborhood. Interstate 90 set the eastern boundary of the Elvehjem neighborhood when it opened in 1961. Today, the Elvehjem neighborhood is bounded by Cottage Grove Road on the north, I-90 on the east, East Buckeye Road on the south, and west by Highway 51. Formal subdivisions began with the Woodvale plat off East Buckeye Road in 1956 and the Acewood plat off Cottage Grove Road in 1958. For the next few years, development would proceed from Woodvale on the southeast and Acewood Boulevard on the northwest. This left an ever-shrinking donut hole of farmland in the middle.
There were a number of vacant spots, and right behind where you live now was a farm when we first arrived. And they had sheep up there, and I guess they also had tobacco. So they had both places. And across the street on Buckeye, on the new what I call the new Buckeye, that area, that was also farmland.
That was the Andersons' farm. Yeah. And just down a little bit on Buckeye was Senator Proxmire's home. Now that's gone, which is really too bad because it was kind of a landmark, really. Mm-hmm. But so he had a home over there, and the Jarsma farm, and it was totally different. I mean, we had a dog and a cat when we moved in, or shortly after we moved in, and they'd go across the street and, hunt in the fields and then come back. And
sometimes the phases of development were not exactly in sync.
Let's see, what else is there? My mother and dad lived on the last house on National Avenue. And when we moved in here in the fall of '59, there was no streets, of course. So when it would freeze, we could drive home. And when it would thaw, we'd have to park on National, because National was a gravel street at the time. And so we could walk from National to home when it was thawing.
We moved here in 1968. Mm-hmm. And I think this was when the street was not open. Now, if Bunny said something different, I'm in trouble. But we used to go up to the corner and get our mail. I know up at the mailmen didn't come down.
We'd been here a while, and I called the post office to ask if they could deliver the mail up to the house, if I could put the mailbox on the house, and they said sure. So I put the mailbox on the house, and the mailman, when I told the mailman about it, he wasn't real happy about it at all.
Conrad A. LVM Elementary School opened in 1962 with 402 students enrolled in kindergarten through 6th grade. The original school building consisted of what is today the kindergarten through 2nd grade wing, together with the office and the old gym. The building was overcrowded from the start. The school opened before construction could be completed. At first, there were no tiles on the floors, and the bells did not ring. Classrooms had no lights, clocks, maps, or flags. The street in front of the school had to be closed to provide a place for recess and physical education classes because there was no playground and no gym. Even the principal did not have an office for several months and had to work from a kindergarten room. Contractors worked outside of school hours, and school staff temporarily relocated classes so construction could be completed. Elvehjem was the first school in the district to have the state-mandated emergency red exit lights installed.
Back then there was no music. Art and music were done in the classroom. I think I remember every teacher having a piano. And the gym was there. We had gym class. And Elvehjem was just one strip of the primary wing with K through 6th grade in that one hallway. And then from there, 7th grade started at La Follette.
LVM Elementary was over capacity from the day it opened. Planning for the first edition was underway before the original building was completed. On opening day, there were up to 35 students in a class, except for the 4th grade class with 45 students. The library had to be moved in order to make room for a second 4th grade class. The following year, the library moved again, this time into the teacher's lounge to allow for another classroom. The first edition opened on the north side of the original building in time for the 1964 school year. Madison's newest fire station, number 5, relocated from Atwood Avenue near Division Street to Cottage Grove Road just east of Highway 51. It is referred to by some in the department as the Country Club. It deserves the name because it is a beauty, both from the standpoint of looks and function, and because it stands almost by itself in a wide open area just beginning to develop. The Wisconsin State Journal, June 27, 1964. The Elvehjem neighborhood was one of the newest neighborhoods on the east side of Highway 51. Folks loved its access to all points in the city and flocked to purchase here.
The school wasn't quite finished, Elvehjem. And Barb went to Lowell Kindergarten. Some lady from Vernon Avenue took several children up every day because there wasn't anything here, of course.
The children in kindergarten could not go. And there was someone who taught kindergarten in their home. A few of the people sent their children to that.
We used to go down to the park down there a lot, and at that time there was like a backstop where you could play. I don't know if there still is, I haven't been down there, but we'd go down there and play softball down there. And of course you had the swings and everything to play on, and then sometimes we'd go to some of the, up by Elvehjem around there. We'd take walks and have the kids ride along with their bikes.
John and Judy Colath became the second owners of 1101 Bonnie Lane. Why? Because of all the kids.
Jim decided he joined Cub Scouts through LVM school. Judy agreed to be a den leader, den mother, and somehow I got volunteered to get on the list for Cub Master. So I was Cub Master over there at PAC 39 for 2 years. It was great to see these kids go from here to
there were so many kids in the neighborhood, and they were all Frank Alice kids. So because there wasn't housing.
We began looking at neighborhoods, and we had some criteria, and the criteria were that we were interested in good schools, and we had heard good things about Elvehjem and Senate and La Follette. We were interested in active, engaged neighborhood, and we were interested in a neighborhood with lots of kids.
One of my favorite things is honestly just hanging out with all of the neighbors, because I'll be inside sitting on the iPad, and then I'll see Treg outside, and that'll just and then so I'll go play with him for an hour,
Yeah, always
So,
kind of the
yeah.
newest little kids are the draw. You see them outside and everybody
Woo.
house out. You're right.
Well, as far as neighborhood events go, I like the 5Ks just because I like running and it's a chance for me to get to run with some of the neighbors too. Like Ty across the street. Like,
And Bonnie and Joel Stone, who are
exactly.
almost 70. I mean,
Exactly.
The area around here was fully open. There were no fences.
No.
As the kids grew up, they just ran from yard to yard with no impediments. Let's see, another thing we did, we would always go up and get fresh eggs from the Starker farm up there and their daughter, because there were no older children in the neighborhood, really. Their older daughter served as our babysitter. We had her for years. And when Bill became the alderman, we really enjoyed that because we were one of the first street to be plowed in the winter. But soon as they left, as soon as the Hulls left, we lost that. Now we're the last street, I think.
We still have the little ruler inside the closet from the other kids.
Gert's kids.
Yeah.
Oh.
Didn't have the heart to take that.
Did you put your kids on it?
No. We had some that weren't attached to the wall, and they probably we didn't keep them, but we should have done.
Gert's kids got a kick out of seeing that when they were over, looking to see what we had done. That's what I can't remember who told us that, but there was a driveway that came from what's now Cottage Grove Road, came up along our back fence line, and the neighbors to the back actually started putting in a garden, and they ran into some old foundations for some outbuildings. So I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I liked all the things that were available for kids, like the big 4th of July parade we'd always do, where you'd put ribbons on your bike and go around the neighborhood. And at the school, I helped out with doing face painting and making posters for the carnivals and for the fun fairs, whatever they call them.
And it's undeveloped enough to have some nature walks. We used to go down, there's a park not too far from here, the Acewood Park, and in addition to the Elvehjem Park, but we'd walk the back way along used to be fish lumber back there, and we'd go along the back fence. There's some trails there and kind of a big woodland, and the kids thought that was great to explore back there. When we got our dogs, we used to walk along the railroad tracks and kind of make the big loop. So it was a good way to introduce the kids to nature and a safe environment.
By the mid-1960s, families began to move into new homes in the painted post developments. Homes on the west side of Bay Ridge Avenue had a view of the Capitol building from their back windows.
The view was just breathtaking. Like I said, the Capitol.
Yeah.
You could almost see the city down from well, of course it's all built up now, but it was pretty. It was very pretty.
As the families moved in, lawns, trees, and mailboxes began to adorn the streets of Elvehjem.
I think you should tell the story of when you were, you and the dog, the black lab, were out running.
We had a big black lab at the time. Lovely, lovely dog. And the dog and I went jogging on an incredibly oppressive hot day. And through the greenway.
Mm-hmm.
And so I figured this dog is a dog. We'll run and we'll run and we'll run until I get tired. Well, we ran and we ran and we ran until the dog got tired. The dog went home. I kept running. And so immediately the thought was, Fred is out there lying across the path someplace in the greenway. The dog came home to get help. So immediately there was a search party out there looking for me. And it's very funny. I think you were a little perturbed at first, and not too happy with me.
Not too happy about that, but
that's a good story.
But everybody, I mean, it was just incredible. Just where is he?
In the spring of 1967, LVM Elementary School held 640 students with 121 in kindergarten alone, and from 27 to 35 students in a class. The second addition to Elvehjem School opened in September 1967. It was built to the west of the original building along Academy Drive and provided 6 new classrooms, an activity room, and more restrooms.
I may have mentioned this, that in 1977, there were more than 700 students at Elvehjem Elementary School. And now, fortunately, we don't have elementary schools in the district that are that large.
Cakewalk, and I remember, I think every year one of us would win.
Oh, somebody would always win.
It was always like a funfetti type cake too. Yeah, and it was.
I remember ice skating on that
marsh,
or marsh, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. But even in the summertime, Elvehjem would have the summer group. I can't remember the name, but there would be arts and crafts. Was it MSCR? Yeah, possibly. And they'd have Kimp that you could buy and Gimp. And then you could do art projects, like you could sign up for like little summer classes to do fun activities. I remember making T-shirts at Elvehjem in the summertime, and all those hot fluorescent tie-dye colors, and it just safe neighborhood. I felt safe and cozy and nostalgic all the way.
So I know I started kindergarten in 1963 with Mrs. May, Frances May, and as it turned out then my children went to Elvehjem, and 2 of my kids had Mrs. May for their kindergarten teacher. But in those days, I always remember I started kindergarten when I was 4, depending on when the cutoff was for your age eligibility to begin. And I think kindergarten was just a half day. And we were part of that baby boom generation. I know my parents talk about my sister doing a class project for like 5th grade at Elvehjem. And she must have done kind of like a field inventory of like a 2-block radius, how many school-age children, and all went to the public school for the most part at Elvehjem. And I think between Wendy Lane and Woodvale, just that boundary, there were over 200 school-age kids. So there were a lot of kids that and that school was fairly new, and but I do remember, those were the days where you would get up and get on your bike and go up to the playground at Elvehjem and play all day and make sure you were home for supper. When I was a kid, we had a 4-H group. We were called the Elvehjem Merrymakers. And, we would have our local meetings, and then we would participate in the state competition at the Dane County Expo, which was all new at the time. And we did things like electricity projects and woodworking, and I think we made a display once about sort of ecology and the environment. I remember we had a bunch of people from our group that did the You're the Solution to Water Pollution, and we tried to demonstrate how, with it being a community of the lakes, how the quality of the water was important, and how we all, and this was at the time when there was Earth Day, and there were a number of people, I think that was, Earth Day came about in the early 70s. And Elvehjem was very involved. We would have a pickup cleanup day. I was always amazed at the amount of stuff that we would haul out of the woods up by the school. It was a good time to grow up and be a youth and be involved in a community that was supportive of families and a definite tie into the schools. But yeah, when I think about the neighborhood association, there were events. I think there was a 4th of July parade, and I actually delivered the Elvehjem Echo, the newspaper, for a number of years when I was a youth. And I just remember it was every household would get a little mimeograph version of a newsletter, and much different than Facebook or digital kind of media today, but good information where people were involved and wanted to be informed and active in what was happening in the neighborhood.
So the neighborhood was a support system too. You know, everybody kind of looked out for each other, and that was a nice thing too. And Gerd Hall, her kids were like the best babysitters. If I wouldn't have had them, I probably wouldn't have got through this marriage with 5 kids, because I could always say, okay, Valerie, put us down for 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we're going to bowl again. And she would come every 2 weeks on a Saturday night, and we would go off bowling for a few hours out in Sun Prairie. So it gave us enough time sitting in the car without 5 kids to talk about things that needed to be talked about without being interrupted. So I always credit the longevity of our marriage to bowling.
Just about every house around here had small children. And that most of the time I think they were all in our backyard.
Yeah.
Which maybe some people wouldn't care for, but we liked it because we knew that the other kids felt comfortable with us. The parents did, having them come over, and the kids were well behaved. Walk about.
I guess you could say I married into the LVM neighborhood. Likewise, but in a different way, because my wife Mariah had grown up in the LVM neighborhood, and in 2008, no, it was 2009. My son was about 9 months old or so. We were starting to outgrow our starter home in Monona, and Mariah's parents were looking to downsize, and we purchased the home from them. And we have been there on Ellen Avenue since then. And it's actually now the 3rd generation of her family who's lived in that house. So I guess with my kids, the 4th.
You kind of, once you're in this neighborhood, you don't really leave. I know we left for a few years, went to Sun Prairie, and came back, and now having my daughter at Elvehjem.
In 1968, the Elvehjem Neighborhood Association was officially formed, with President Harold Smith presiding. It marked the beginning of an organization that would grow over the years as the neighborhood developed.
It should be noted that the Elvehjem is the oldest continuously operating neighborhood association in the city of Madison. It began in 1968 and has never skipped a beat, disbanded or slowed down in all the years from 68 to the current time.
The ENA started a monthly newsletter in 1968 called The Echo. Early echoes highlighted the neighbors playing bridge and euchre and advocating for streetlights and traffic control for the Woodvale and Starker intersections. They were also working on mosquito control for the neighborhood. In the Echo newsletters of the 1970s, a dinner dance was held at the Monona Community Center for $11 per couple. In April of 1970, the YMCA construction began. An article reported that $400,000 of the needed funds were raised.
The YMCA was all new when we were growing up, and that was we spent a lot of time at the Y on Cottage Grove Road.
That started around 1970.
Yeah, and it was just the palace. I mean, it was the state of the art, and the pool and the gym, and you know, we participated in all the activities there, and it was a real asset for the community.
In May of 1970, there was a mother-daughter style show attended by 100 people. The Acewood Pond Report was published. Birth announcements and ads filled out the newsletter. In June of 1970, a father-son Brewer game was held. A busload of 44 folks attended at a cost of $3.80 each, including transportation. In July of 1970, there was yet another 4th of July parade.
Part of this aldermanic district was at one time not in the city, it was in one of the townships. Okay. Towns don't require drainage, curbs and gutters. Okay. So the issue was for my constituents who lived in the area without curb and gutter was that the mosquito problem every summer was just awful, and can't we do something about it? Now, curbs and gutters ought to be a feature of most, except under special circumstances. In my view, it ought to be a feature of the city. So I said, I'll take care of it, don't worry. And I did. And of course, it meant tax assessment. So that made me very unpopular. I just did it.
As the neighborhood developed with new homes, families needed a place to shop for groceries. A brand new Century grocery store opened. It has been missed by many neighbors since they closed the doors for good in 2014. Many folks enjoyed the series of restaurants that followed Poole's Pig's Ear, especially CJ's, where neighbors and families gathered for meals and conversation. The newest eatery here is the North of the Bayou restaurant featuring Cajun and Creole cuisine. When Fish Building Supply opened in 1974, it was the largest store of its kind in Wisconsin. Fish was later purchased by UBC, and the stores were rebranded in 1999. The retail store closed in 2001, and the millwork and truss factory closed a few years later. Today the site is home to Cedar Creek, a wholesale lumber and building materials company. In 1974, Our Savior's Lutheran Church relocated their ministry to their current location on Droster Road. In 1987, they celebrated their 100th year of ministry. In August 1978, the Wildwood Family Clinic opened on Cottage Grove Road. 4 new physicians had a dream to open a family-focused clinic. They chose the right location and found investors to help make it happen. The clinic expanded in 2006.
Alice, Dan, and I, later Kelvin, just got together and decided we would try something different. We saw that this property on Cottage Grove Road was for sale. It was actually like 7 or 8 acres. And so we put in a bid, and we found we were bidding against someone else.
And who was that?
Turned out it was actually the Dean Clinic wanted to buy this for their East Side branch, but well, we were kind of hippie-like back then. We were so we were very idealistic about ways we wanted to run things, and maybe a little too idealistic. We had a number of we hired some really good people that taught us business and made us.
As I recall, one of the major mortgage lenders was National Guardian Life, and so it's an insurance company. They made, and I think I was part of that too. They made us all take out insurance policies on our lives, which basically, if we died, would pay off the mortgage.
Payable to the insurance company, so that we would, they get their money out of it. And in my wasted youth, I used to be a hang glider, and flying kites. And I had to sign a specific rider that there would be no more hang gliding until the mortgage was completely paid off. So that was the end of my flight career.
We saved his life.
Yeah, right.
But he sacrificed that for the clinic.
Yes.
In the Echo newsletters of the 1980s, in January 1980, another dinner dance was held. Fred Arnold was our alderman. The babysitter list was in full swing, as well as the lost and found and for sale columns. In March, the annual meeting of the ENA was held. April brought us a family roller skate party for 50 cents each, and in August, a free pet show was held. September brought a La Follette Booster Club event for $5 per couple. In 1980, Cottage Grove Road, also called County Highway BB, was expanded from a 2-lane blacktop to a 4-lane boulevard between Inwood Way and Interstate 90.
It took the entire summer of 1980. I think they started in April, and that whole stretch of street was closed all summer long. So it was the quietest summer we spent up there.
In the 1990s, the second addition to Buckeye Woods became the 44th and final subdivision in the Elvehjem neighborhood.
Now, I got kind of a story for you. There's one lot that remained in the Elvehjem neighborhood. It's like, 3 houses up from the railroad tracks, east of the railroad tracks on East Buckeye. Oh, gee, the ground's starting to dig up and all that stuff. They're finally building the house in there. Next thing you know, there's a house perched on that thing. They moved a house in. What made it real interesting, it was my next door neighbor from my previous house before I moved in the neighborhood. Their house moved. So not only people are moving into the neighborhood, but houses from different neighborhoods are moving.
Echo newsletter highlights from the 1990s included a January 1990 article reported that there were skating parties at the Elvehjem rink and 1950s and 60s themed dances for adults. February brought on Kennedy Little League registration, and in March 1990, the ENA published a mission statement. June featured the Wildlife Sanctuary, and we had our first color Echo cover. In August, the ENA sponsored Adele's dog track excursion with bus trip for $2.25 each. In the fall, there were roller skating parties and the start of a new trend, dance aerobics classes. In November, there was a notice of Santa visits and the news that the City of Madison recycling program would be starting soon. The ENA sponsored a book drive to provide books to Elvehjem school students.
Oh, well, there was the July 4th, the big cookout.
Independence Day, yeah.
Yeah.
And the parade.
Yes, of course.
The parade had a long route.
Yeah. The Easter egg hunt, too, has been around for...
Did you do that at Droster Park, too?
We do that at Acewood, actually. Well, I was very active in this group called Bikies, which was an online group. And I started getting kind of angry when I realized how many facilities the West Side had for bicycling, and ours pretty much ended, on the near East Side. Yeah, Dennett. So it took literally a couple of years of me nagging relentlessly a lot, and then other people started joining in. And our efforts, and that included showing up at meetings and complaining, got that extension put in 6 years ahead of schedule.
The Elvehjem School playground is a magnet for kids at play. Together with the Elvehjem Woods Park and shelter, they have drawn families for ball games, football practice, or just a picnic in the neighborhood. In 1990, the PTO raised funds and wrote a grant for a new play structure at the rear of the school. The grant provided additional funds to provide handicapped access elements. The vendor for the play structure allowed the PTO parents to provide the labor to assemble the structures under its direct supervision. It was a true collaboration of parents, teachers, and students. On the afternoon of May 3, 1991, fire broke out at the Central Storage Warehouse on Cottage Grove Road. By the time the fire was declared out on May 11th, it had become the largest fire and environmental hazard in the history of the city of Madison and had made national news. It came to be known as the Butter Fire because the refrigerated warehouse contained millions of pounds of butter, cheese, hot dogs, sausages, and other food products. The fire spread quickly, and eventually caused the building to collapse and send a river of melted butter, cheese, and meat into the street where it pooled under the Stoughton Road overpass. The Madison Fire Department called in all off-duty personnel and requested mutual aid from surrounding fire departments. Neighbors brought food and beverages to Fire Station 5 across the street from the fire to help feed the firefighters and police officers at the scene. No lives were lost in the fire, a tribute to all the nearby fire departments called in to assist. The aroma of rancid food wafted over the neighborhood until late June, when the last of the debris had been cleaned up. Central storage was back in operation by the fall of 1991. Those who lived in the neighborhood at the time will never forget the events of that afternoon.
And I remember I came out of work that day and I was walking up the ramp to my car and I see this big plume of smoke over near where we live. And I actually, first thing I thought was that Royster, the fertilizer factory, was on fire. Never occurred to me that a freezer could burn. But later that night, then I woke up and there was a squad car on the other side of Cottage Grove Road that was driving up and down the streets, and I could hear that he was announcing something, but I couldn't understand it. And so we turned on the radio, and that's when we found out that the fire was getting near the ammonia tanks and threatening to breach those, and they said everybody within a mile of the fire was being evacuated. But nobody ever drove up and down Ferris Avenue with, making announcements. So we packed the kids up and went over to Michelle's parents who had moved here, and they lived over in Camelot. So we went over there about 3 o'clock in the morning and camped out at Grandma and Grandpa's house.
Fire. We should have been evacuated, but no one ever woke us up, so luckily it didn't come here.
And the wind was always going in the right direction, so it didn't affect us really, other than driving by there on the hot summer days for several years. You could still smell the butter.
Mainly they were afraid of the big receivers that were just south of where our engine room was, just off of Freezer 3. And fortunately, the fire department that night, and I was back there with a fire chief and two fire women and 2 firemen. This was around 3, 4 in the morning. And the fire chief felt he could have that wall that was between the electrical system and the ammonia tanks fall in rather than out. If it fell out, then everything had gone. And it was rather interesting because he was called out by the commander, and he said, "I'm staying, I think," and he had to allow his people to go, and they said, "No, we'll stay with you." And we got it to go. We were up to our knees in flowing butter on the dock.
Yeah, we were just kind of flowing out. Just
and
reached its melting point and took off.
Yeah, but we were fortunate because we got that wall to fall in towards the where the fire was, and saved that engine room, which then mitigated any problem with the ammonia. Yeah, well, the major difficulty, of course, was the butter, and during that night was the DNR getting hold of me and saying we got a big problem, which was the butter going down Starkweather Creek, and it was going to go in Lake Monona, and it would have killed all the fish, everything, and so. At that time, the city engineers came up and they devised a plan where they started at the point of where the Starkweather goes into the Lake Monona and backed it up and diverted everything into sanitary sewer. And so they backed it all the way up. And in the meantime, we'd got somebody to build a huge pit out here that would contain the butter. Didn't help much with the smell, but we did That was the only way we could avoid polluting the lake. When we had the fire, we couldn't, we lost most of our clientele, the customers, and Ocean Spray said they would honor their contract with us if we could get a place up fast enough for them. So we ended up building on the site over where the fire had started, Freezer 8, and built that and got it up and ready started in July and got it up and ready at the end of September to take the cranberries in for Ocean Spray.
1993 saw the construction of the third addition to Elvehjem School. It included a new gym, a new library, and more classrooms. Students formed a book brigade to move the contents of the library to the new location. In 2007 and 2008, the parents of Elvehjem Elementary School worked tirelessly to raise money in partnership with area builders to build the first large, fully accessible playground in the state of Wisconsin.
And so we developed a plan, and then so the actual physical layout of it, and that took hours and hours. There were many, many people sitting at kitchen tables looking over the plan for many, many days. And then from there, we put together our plan for how we were going to raise the money. And we decided, because we were at a community, an elementary school community like Elvehjem, that we were going to hold family-friendly fundraising events every month. So in addition to the fundraising events, we wrote a lot of grants, and we had a lot of moms and dads coming together with their professional skills to make those types of things happen. And networking with their businesses, they were more than willing to share their points of contact, and if one person couldn't do it, another person knew somebody that could do it. And so that's how we raised the money. And then from there, we had a groundbreaking on 8/8/08 at 8 a.m. And we had a band here, and the kids marched across the field with hard hats on, and we stuck shovels in the ground. And the Madison Community Foundation also came forward, and we wrote a grant for that and donated over $50,000. And then also helped us set up an endowment to maintain the playground, so it will last for a long time, and it won't be an expense for the school district. And we wanted to do this all outside of the school district because we knew the school district was struggling to fund regular classroom activities and put paper in the copy machines and things like that. So this was purely an outside of school group. And so what happened then was when we cut the ribbon, we donated the playground to the school district. So it is actually a school district piece of property, but it has a maintenance endowment. The benefits that we've seen, it's been amazing because there are things that we never envisioned. I mean, we thought of this as something for the kids, and not just our kids who use wheelchairs or assistive devices or have disabilities, but all kids, because my son Noah uses a wheelchair, and we had one of his friends come to him when we were putting this all together, and he said, I really want to play with Noah on the playground. And the only thing that Noah could do was wait for him at the bottom of the slide. And so now all kids can be together. One of my favorite things that happened was when my son and I were playing on the playground one day, a woman came up to me, and she didn't know me, and I didn't know her, which it was right after we did the build, and we had met quite a few people during that time period, which was really fun. The community really came together. A lot of people got to know everybody else's kids and their extended family, but I didn't know her. And she approached me, and we were talking. I said, it's a beautiful day to be out on the playground. She said, yeah, it is. And she said, we just moved to the neighborhood because this playground is here. And I was like, really? I didn't know, what does she mean by that? And she said that it wasn't the physical structure of the playground. It was when she toured the house, it was a for sale by owner home. And the homeowner had left out on her counter an article about the community coming together to build a playground. And she said, I want to live in a community like that. I want to live someplace where a community sees an issue and then gathers people together and makes it happen.
The Echo newsletter got a new look at the beginning of 2000. A walking club started up in January. In May, the ENA sponsored an old-fashioned plant exchange, and a mother's group was started to create group visits to local parks and the zoo. The LVM Fun Day and July 4th Parade were combined in 2000 when the ENA sponsored both, including a cookout. In September, there was an Elvehjem Park Cleanup Day. In November, the ENA sponsored a Santa sing-along at Messiah Lutheran Church. Also in November, after 70 years of serving Madison and our neighborhood, Dave Gerhardt closed his drugstore. The ENA could always count on Gerhardt's to pitch in and help the association. In December, the ENA sponsored another Christmas light contest. In the 2000s, Elvehjem neighborhood entered the social media age with a Facebook page and a website.
When we first started talking about Facebook was that there were a couple of older people on the board that didn't think we should get involved in social media at all. And we had one young man on the board, Ryan McKee, who was really insistent that we should try it, and he thought we were backwards if we didn't try, if we didn't get a Facebook page started up. So I mean, between the hits we get on the website and the activity on the Facebook page, we remain one of the most active neighborhood associations in the city.
With development comes landscaping, and all those plants and shrubs are food for rabbits, woodchucks, squirrels, raccoons, and possums. For the most part, we are able to get along with appropriate fencing, squirrel-resistant bird feeders, and the occasional removal of particularly troublesome critters. Scarcity of food and water has occasionally attracted larger animals into the neighborhood. In the drought year of 2010, wild turkeys wandered through our yards looking for food and water. In the fall of 2015, there was a very significant increase in urban coyote activity on Madison's east side, with 81 sightings reported. Elvehjem was at the epicenter of this activity with a total of 34 coyote sightings. In fact, the Elvehjem and East Buckeye neighborhoods represented 70% of the mapped sightings on the east side, including 2 deaths and 1 serious injury to pet dogs. Elvehjem residents took action. Justin Martin established the East Madison Coyotes Facebook group. Terry Weiland, Mona Everett, and Heritage Heights resident Beth Godfrey developed an informational poster and handout for an educational campaign to help prevent more pet injuries and deaths. Coyotes are still seen throughout Madison, but much less frequently than in 2015.
Yes, yeah, I'm definitely in the know. You know, and I work on the side of town by choice. And actually I get that question, I just recently got that question from another officer. Do you really like working in the neighborhood you live in? I said, oh, absolutely. I really know what's going on, and you know, not that there's any more ownership in my own neighborhood, or there should be, but I mean there is. I hate to say it, there is, but it's kind of the perk of working in the neighborhood I live in, I guess. It's kind of.
So I say that, as you did mention, we do. A lot of our youth here in this church does like to volunteer, and we like to get involved with the community, mostly because I feel we all agree on this, that this community is like very amiable, very friendly, and like very family based, you know. You get that family feel with everyone that you get to communicate with. And like with the different events, I know not all of our youth participates, but some do get to participate here and there, some others over here, and we kind of like the feel of the whole overall neighborhood.
And when we saw this place, we saw, wow, this is amazing. It's a huge church. The neighborhood is beautiful, you know, because it's such a peaceful place, and we thought it would be fitting to have a church here.
Well, I think it's interesting that for the families that were kind of young families back in the late 60s and early 70s that basically stayed in their neighborhood and then now are in your senior years, and they sell and move into a senior housing situation. Well, who comes in but a new young family? So there's I think a good mix of age groups within the neighborhood.
Buckeye Road was rebuilt in 2011 as a 2-lane street with traffic calming dividers, new sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. In 2015 and 2016, the Highway 51 and Cottage Grove Road interchange was rebuilt.
It's an honor to serve, and I love LVM neighborhood. It's the best. You know, if it's the Easter egg hunt or Santa Claus or, you know, the 4th of July festival, I mean, there's always things going on and people involved, and I just hope it continues for the next 50 years and beyond that. Right. So. And it's just the people. I remember, I'll tell a quick story. A past president of LVM neighborhood, I was knocking on doors and came across a home where people with developmental disabilities lived. And they had an issue with snowplows going by in the wintertime, and then she would get out and shovel out the driveway because the bus came to pick up people, and then snowplows would go by and block her right in. We all have that experience, right? But for her it was especially difficult because she had folks in wheelchairs, and so getting it done was just not easy. So I contacted like the Boy Scouts, and I contacted the city. I mean, I was trying to find help for this gal, and I contacted the neighborhood president, and she found what she called neighborhood angels, and that came over and scooped the driveway for her and made sure that it was open, so she didn't have to deal with it. And that's been my experience with LVM. That's the kind of neighborhood it is, and you know, where people just come together. So that's pretty great, because that doesn't happen all over all the time.
Well, that brings a closing to the E&A's 50th anniversary celebration. I hope you enjoy the look back at our neighborhood's rich history. Oh, and when I'm 60, I hope to be part of the 100th year anniversary.